So we're going to talk about populism. Lucas, this is something you brought to my attention. So I'm going to let you start us out here. But I thought when I was thinking about populism and what to put on the screen, I was thinking about this, and I know that some people have done an analysis of how many people were escorting various different people who have committed atrocities, serial killers, and whatever. And I think that it's been said that there's never quite been this large of an entourage. So I'm looking at this as kind of a proxy for the state trying to hold back the tide of populism, because we've got this individual who has expressed himself in a very heinous way, murdering someone, but feeling very unempowered, I think, in the world. And this is somewhat what I started thinking about when you said let's talk about populism, because it's got to be a reaction somewhat to the oppression of the state, right?
Well, and I really liked your selection for this to start off the conversation. We have Luigi Mangione here being perp walked back into New York City, and yeah, that's quite an entourage that he has there. Um, it's also pretty striking the selection, of the way that he stands out in the picture. Um, but yeah,
Because what do they fear? I mean, what is going on here? Like, why do we need this many people to perp walk this one guy? Is it because they think that there's a mass of people who disagree with what's going on here and would grab him, free him? Like, what is the thought process here? Why is there such a massive amount of armed guards that are needed to escort this individual?
well, earlier this year, there was a murder by a grandmother of children who murdered the mother of her grandchildren whenever she was coming in to pick them up in custody. And whenever those killers were arraigned, the people around were so angry that they, I think, legitimately feared snipers or some sort of violence from the populace. And this was in a small town in Oklahoma. It's This seems to ring off key here because there hasn't been a large outcry in protest to what Mangione allegedly did to the killing of the CEO of United Healthcare. There has been outcry from Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, CEOs who've talked about the fiduciary duty of corporations to return profits to their shareholders. But I don't know that the crowds of the huddled masses in New York and across America necessarily agree. So,
Well, I definitely think they don't, because they're not shareholders. They're only the recipients of the other side of what happens here. Like, it's the landed class who is the shareholders of these companies. It's not the masses that are out there shivering in the streets and being denied health care. So probably this entourage size is right if it's the state saying they fear that there would be some kind of a reaction from the individuals who may disagree with what's going on here. And as I started to look through some of the reaction of what people have said, it's shocking to see how many people are saying they would just nullify the verdict and let him go free. That's been almost overwhelming, that people are starting to understand the power of a jury, and what they might do in light of them disagreeing with the relative weight of what's happened here, the amount of misery that was inflicted upon the populace by the CEO and this one company, and denying claims and denying healthcare versus what this one individual did.
well, I'm glad. I'm always glad to see Americans and people around the world grappling with the power of juries and the distinction between law and legislation. And I know there'll be a great hand wringing of the legal class and of judges who say that the mere mortals do not understand. But the notion adversarial justice in America was about juries, about peers determining what they thought was right or wrong, and that superseding or trumping, should I say, what was decided by elected Republicans, small r Republicans. So no, I think this is a brilliant example of the rise of populism within our own borders. We talk about it so often with regards to Trump and to MAGA and Maha, to Bernie, and before that to Ron Paul. But the thing that I've wondered in the wake of the election of Trump is if we do begin to see the populists who have supported Trump begin to hold hands with the populists who have supported Bernie Sanders. I'm very interested to see what Trump's actions are, and what the actions of his cabinet are, as he comes into office. And I'm not sure that that's going to play out as populists think, but Trump seems, earnest or honest with regards to his compassion in some ways. But he's all, I pause as I say that. He's floated things out like capping the credit card fees, but who knows if he has the answers to do so. But this is also something that is more broadly occurring across the world. And I think that we should also look at this, look at the message that's projected here, the strength and the authority of the government, of the establishment, of the police, of the justice system. And we have also manipulated and tried to frame that story around the world. I mean, did you catch the Reuters story earlier this year? Just a couple of days ago, the news that dropped about the amount of funding that that the United States has channeled towards Reuters to influence the narrative that they create as business news for the businesses of the world.
Yeah, let me pull it up. That's not something that I was particularly looking at, but I think we should throw it on the screen. So the Reuters came up with the budget for the CIA.
No, not the budget for the CIA, but Reuters has received massive payments from NGOs related to the CIA, and probably I don't know them offhand, but I would imagine that this goes back to the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, and also USAID. I don't know if you also caught whenever in the wake of the Syria, in the wake of the Syria coup, do we call it war? I don't know, at the ousting of Assad in Syria, and by is it Jelani? There was a picture of him in a tent, and if you look at the tent, you can see plastered on the sides of it USAID, and the USAID is a carefully selected acronym to make us think that it's about rendering aid, but in reality, it's the United States Agency for International Development, and other groups like the National Endowment for Democracy are ways in which the United States has been using the dollar, using money to influence policy in the rest of the world, and it's collapsing. The censorship that has been wrought on the citizens of the United States has been collapsing since Elon bought Twitter. It is likewise collapsing throughout the world. It's part of the reason that we see the rise of populism that's happening. We had a conversation with Alex and talked about what's going on in France, but likewise, it's also happening in Romania, in in Austria, in Germany, in Spain. So this is something that we're seeing. This is something that we're seeing occur everywhere, and I also think that it becomes we're coming to a pivotal point in what happens also, because we are now having a fight over the funding of the federal government. And a lot of that funding of the federal government goes to our social safety network here in the United States, towards Medicare and Medicaid and to Social Security. And another large chunk of that goes towards our defense spending. But this is also where we put money into the likes of the programs of USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy. And we're seeing Trump and Republicans talk about cutting off that funding left and right. So I've gone off on a rant. Anything strike you in all of that?
Oh, you caught me trying to pull something up because I noted that you had referenced something that had been happening on X, and I noted that we should probably bring it up quick. So this is stuff that Mike Benz was talking about, right, on a recent episode of Joe Rogan. Is that one place that we could reference and say this is a place to learn about USAID? Because it looks like this is when he was talking about it, right?
Yeah, Mike Benz is absolutely phenomenal for digging into the details of how the United States. Mike Benz worked for the State Department under in the Trump administration.
The first Trump
And
administration.
the first Trump administration.
Is he plan to have a place again or not necessarily?
I don't know. His star has rose meteorically with. He started writing after the Trump he started writing after the first Trump administration, a book that he called "Weapons of Mass Deletion," which was an expose with the pressure that the State Department was using, the State Department and the Biden administration was exerting on social media companies to take down posts. And that was done. That began to that was something that we were doing. That the United States government, I say we, that the I had no part in this, that the United States government was exerting on other countries like Western Europe in order to suppress the rise of populism in Western Europe in the wake of Brexit, because NATO and the Euro are very much projects that are in America's interests. And then after COVID hit the United States, they were methods that the United States then began to turn on the American people. And so he wrote a book about this, and then started talking about it. I began following him on Rumble several months ago. He's incredible with his knowledge of the history of the dirty tricks of the CIA, and also the methods in which they or I should say this, he says the blob, and it's a word I've been seeing more and more, because it's not just the CIA. This is the State Department working in concert with the Department of Defense and with the administration of the executive or the president and with the CIA. And now, sadly, as it turns into the United States, and we begin to understand more with the FBI and the Department of Justice. So again, this has begun to collapse in some ways, especially with the purchase of X by Elon Musk, and the fact that he wasn't playing ball with them. other of these social, other of these tech companies have been loath to participate, but also, without, as they may have seen it, the power to fight it. But more politicians are aware of it. It's coming to the fore, and not only is it beginning to flounder here in the United States, but it's also floundering in Western Europe. And again, I think this is why we have seen what is the populism about in Europe. In some ways, it's a nationalist response to the policies that have been forced on European countries with regards to the conflict in Russia, to the conflicts in the Middle East, the sort of the result of engaging in those conflicts in the Middle East, the
Arab Spring was part of this too. I mean, that was
yeah,
that was one of the early bell rings of this happening. And yeah, I definitely see where you're going with this, as far as this is a tide that seems to be sweeping the entire world. And at the same time, we've got billionaires that are building bunkers and robots and AI to try to, I don't know, cloister themselves away from, I don't know if they fear this tide or if they feel that it's coming and that they've done everything they could to tamp it down. But it sure seems like there's a misalignment. Kind of reminds me of that old "let them eat cake" kind of adage.
Well, this, I think, also, we also often in our conversations go back to the Nixon shock, back to 1971. We've had an episode about the shadow dollar, and in that we also discussed the milkshake, or this policy developed by the United States in the wake of the Nixon shock under the administrations of help me out here, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was sort of a regathering, but then under Jimmy Carter, and then gaining strength going forward, the United States wanted to continue to be the banker for the game of monopoly of the world, and yet there was no gold behind the stacks of money that we were putting over there in that money slot. And so we began this and I like the milkshake analogy, but we began to participate in this system where we would pay off world leaders to play in the system. So, and we would give them, $400 million and say, you got to spend $380 million $360 million in reinvesting in American companies, maybe oil companies, maybe other international, shipping companies, or whatever that may be. You got to spend $20 million on improving the livelihoods of or the foundations of democracy in your country, and you can keep 20 million for yourself. And as long as they especially were investing that money back into American companies, this is part of how the United States was able to counterfeit dollars and launder them and keep them coming back to the pockets of Americans. And that system began to break down. And when it began to break down, we started wars. This is why we had the 7 countries in the Middle East that we were so keen to fight wars in. Why? Because those countries were not playing ball with the milkshake system. Why did we get rid of Saddam Hussein, somebody that we had set up to be the leader of Iraq? Because he was no longer returning the money that we had been giving him through foreign aid, through these NGOs underneath the direction of the CIA. He was no longer investing them in American businesses, and he was having rather unempirical, haha, notions of sovereignty and getting out of the American system. So we declared that, well, if he wasn't spending that money reinvesting in American companies, he must be buying weapons of mass destruction. And whether that was yellow cake uranium that he was buying from Nigeria or sarin gas that he was buying from Russia, we were sure that they must be there, and that was the reason to start a coup or to start a war. And it's only gotten more out of hand. I mean, part of the reason that we go to war in Libya is because Muammar Gaddafi is not playing ball with America, and hasn't worked out so well for us in those countries. We've recently somehow through a partnership with Turkey and Israel have managed to topple Assad's regime in Syria, but meanwhile the house is burning up behind us, and I look to again all of these countries in Western Europe who have not been able to quell populist elections. And this is not only happening in Western Europe, but remember Venezuela had an election this summer, and we declared that despite the international agencies that were monitoring the election and that they had declared that the election was conducted fairly, we declared that we didn't like the winner and we wanted it to be somebody that we had selected. Well, this is old hat with America. And one of the tools that we have used to perpetuate, our authority was also through the likes of journalism, and we begin to understand and see that more in the uprising of social media. Part of what happens in a world where political candidates can get on X and get on Spaces or have a TikTok channel and speak to the populace is they are no longer gatekept by the likes of Reuters, the likes of the AP.
Yeah,
Landing.
that was like one of the huge breakouts for Trump. I mean, he started just speaking directly to the American people with his own voice on Twitter, not filtered through what was happening with the press junkets or whatever is used to be the way that the president would speak. It was groundbreaking. It was completely different than anything we'd seen before.
Yeah, and I mean I wish that Trump continued to come back to Twitter. He uses Truth Social. I think he's maybe wise to do so because enough people follow him, and that gets redisseminated through the other platforms. But absolutely, he also had a battle with we say the neocons, the Bushes, and that was also part of a machine that was about this narrative of sending out emails and getting all this money donated to a campaign. Sounds like a weird shadow system to what we were doing with all these other countries, doesn't it? You've got to donate all this money. I'll spend this money on buying advertising. I need to have this staff. I'm going to pay some members of my staff $400,000 for a 9-month campaign. And Trump said, I don't need that. I need to speak directly to the people, and then turn around and look at the narrative of mainstream media coming out of 2016. They said, how could Donald Trump have won? He didn't spend any money. And then they started pointing their finger at each other and saying, oh, you gave him all this free press coverage. You've underhanded the democratic process of America by listening to someone who wasn't vetted as being a serious candidate. But this is the way of the future. And I look at Trump's selections in his cabinet, and it's been interesting to me to see the likes of Hegseth for the Department of is it Defense? It's not Secretary of Defense, is it?
Hegseth. I thought it was something like that, something related to the military.
Well, whatever it is, so
Let me
many of
let me look it up quick. I
yeah,
can
look
find
it
it.
up, but it's
Secretary of Defense. Yeah, you're right. Secretary of
it
Defense.
it is defense, it is
Yeah.
defense. I was thinking maybe it was just Veterans of Foreign Affairs, or the VFW, but that's just one of his, main agendas. Um, but, he took Trump and Hegseth both took flack, again, as being, quote, unquote, "not serious." But I'm always interested that Trump seems to pick communicators, and I think it's novel for us to see politicians pick somebody not for their, quote, unquote, "ideas," but for their ability to communicate ideas back to the public. If he picks Dan Bongino to be, the head of the Secret Service. That's in one hand because of his experience, but also I would see it as a powerful choice because, Dan Bongino knows how to express himself and to convey a message to a large audience. And it seems that we're moving into a world where some of these middlemen of establishing narratives, talking points and points that are disseminated through traditional media and launched on one show and propelled through others, and that establish these narratives. Like that system is crashing down. So, I did.
Well, and it's interesting to see how some of these press conferences have started to devolve as well. I mean, it's like it used to be that you could give a non-answer and it would just like you could get away with it. It almost seems like you can't get away with it anymore because people are tired of not getting an answer. So now if you do that sort of thing, then you just give rise to people finding the alternative story somewhere else because now there are just other ways to get information. And like the official line that you try to foist upon the populace, it's not as easy to just get away with it, I think. Right?
Absolutely, and this is, I mean, it's a great thing. I love to see, somebody asked Trump, I think it was whether he would support Israel if they attacked Iran recently in a press conference, and he just said, "I can't answer that. What kind of an idiot would answer that? And how would that change in the future?" Um, and it's also been impressive to see Trump. Come back with, in some ways, honest answers, because there can be many different varieties of an honest answer. But also, I've been impressed to see him less agitated, and I think that shows not any change in his message, but is a reflection of the growth of power in his medium. He's fighting a much diminished mainstream media. I mean, uh, Joe Rogan with a Mike Benz interviews, and nobody's heard of Mike Benz 3 months previous, has millions and millions of listens, and some of these uh, television shows are watched by 50,000 people now, and in large part the people who are consuming those through these traditional methods are are um, you know members of the older generations. Did you happen to see, and I posted it over on the right, Rich Grenell. Rich Grenell is the selection, Trump's selection for an ambassador, I believe the ambassador to Pakistan, um, but I'm not sure about that. But he was also part of Trump's cabinet in his previous administration, and the gay ambassador. So, back whenever Trump was supposedly anti-gay, and here he had Rich Grenell right by his side. After all those years in New York City going to clubs, um, Rich Grenell posted this free Imran Khan, and it had 10 million views. And I saw a comment under the post that also said it would have had 100 million views if X was not banned in Pakistan. So I find this also fascinating because I do believe it was at the pressure of the United States for the Pakistan government to I can't remember all the details of it because it was too long ago, and we've engaged our dirty tricks in too many countries of the world. But this seemed to me, well, one, I think the United States played a part in the incarceration, the arrest and incarceration of Imran Khan. He was a very popular soccer star, a populist leader in Pakistan in the wake of the United States involvement there for the last 20 years. And the United States did not want to see him as the leader of that country. And yet here we have a new regime, Republicans, not neocons, MAGA, whatever we want to call them. And Richard Grenell said, hey, the Pakistani people want to see Imran Khan freed. Maybe that's what a change we ought to see in the world. So this is a positive. I mean, when I see the United States acknowledging the sovereignty and the decisions of other countries rather than in trying to enforce their will on them, I think that's a good thing. So something to keep an eye on.
So does this play into the idea of populism that we've been talking about? Is that where do you see that, or is this just another interesting thing that sort of caught your
Absolutely populism. I mean, Imran Khan was a soccer star. So it's also interesting again to see a politician picked not because of their supposed policy goals and that they know something that the regular person doesn't, but as um, as someone who came with a public persona and could maybe communicate some hard truths that the country was facing and be a leader for for populism, whatever that means, nationalism, populism, I don't know, but maybe for expressing and conveying power to more than just a couple of families or business owners that were playing part of the American the international dollar laundering scheme. And that's how I see Imran Khan. Like I'm not I'm I, there are too many countries of the world with too many nuanced problems and political questions that need to be answered in each one of them. But the United States has long found the one who was going to take American dollars that we had manufactured through the monetization of debt and reinvest them in American companies so that the owners of American corporations and companies and investors in those companies could realize gains. And I don't care what the issues are in the separate countries around the world. What I'm interested in is to see them concerned about the fairness, the equality, the standard of living in their own countries, and not relying on foreign quote unquote aid, because the United States has not been honest about the aid that it's given, and again we have paid off leaders of countries around the world to participate in this scheme. And so when we see populism, I think the first thing that we should think about is, does this mean that they're not playing in the United States empire money laundering scheme?
So the correlation is as the American dollar has lost its dominance and it's been able to clamp down, populism is the natural consequence of that empire overreach waning.
Absolutely. And there were shivers of fear again, going back to Brexit and the global financial crisis in 2008, that this was going to happen more quickly. We shored up our defenses.
I think partly too there's a fear of this, right? It's saying, hey, America was sort of holding back something that a lot of people maybe didn't want to see happen, right? Is that that populism would start to happen, that they preferred the empire.
I mean, I think American both shareholders, those people who were benefiting from that system, but again, going back to what we started this episode out with Luigi Mangione and the 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 assassination of the United Healthcare Group CEO. You know, neither inside the United States or in the countries that we forced into this dollar empire has it been fair for those people who benefit from the counterfeiting, the production, the inflation of the money supply. Um, those people who have benefited, it has not been everyone, and the distribution of that money that was created has been managed so that it appears that we're all getting, that we have a little bit more every year, but some people were getting a hell of a lot more than everybody else. And so, I think that that we have, Mitt Romneys and Lindsey Grahams who are terrified of what this means in the future. But um, if the future is bad for uh, leveraged buyout organizations and the military industrial the complex and companies that rely on methods of coercion, like building bombs and building drones that kill people. I don't know what we're afraid of. A poor America and a poorer world uh, is less threatening to me than one that relies on methods of violence to maintain the status quo. So that's what I hope that we're looking at. So, and I don't know that it necessarily means a poor America. And we could think about Trump's the conversation that goes on about Trump and his tariffs. Uh, we haven't even mentioned Canada in this too. Canada is also facing a rise in populism. Justin Trudeau is facing problems, and he came to Mar-a-Lago to visit Trump recently, and Trump said, Trump said, we send you $100 million a year. What do what are you going to do without the United States if we begin to lock up our economy with tariffs, and you feel threatened about that because you don't have a broader economy, or a broader base in which to engage in markets with? Maybe you ought to think about joining us. Um, and that might seem a threat to Canada's sovereignty, but a world in which those relationships are acknowledged and founded under I don't know, agreements that are written down, I think is a lot better than us sending $100 million to a country here, a country there, and that not being apparent and equally or distributed fairly amongst the people who live in that country. And I think that's the system we live under now.
Some heavy thoughts. It's I definitely am seeing the dissatisfaction with the way that Canada has been managed. There's a lot of people very upset about how things have gone, and seeing the erosion of what they thought were their values or their standard of living. And yeah, I think Canada is a really good place to look. I know you mentioned Mexico as well. Like, what have you seen in Mexico as far as the rise of populism?
Well, there's been there's been a quote unquote leftist movement for quite some time in Mexico, and there's been there have been countries that have participated in the in the the dollar laundering scheme, the dollar milkshake program, and there have also been countries that and have participated in it, I should say, through taking money and the leaders of the country keeping some percentage of that, and then structuring um, the 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 relationship of business uh, to be beneficial to the United States. There are other countries who said we don't necessarily need the payoff, but if this is what you need, you also need, if the United States is generating dollars and the rest of the world is using them, and the United States, like the one piece of utility that they bring to the rest of the world is that's where the dollar tree is, and the dollars must be rerouted through it. Well, you also still need products, and so we would like to be the place that doesn't necessarily just benefit from the leftovers of the laundry program, but like actually make goods on on that side. And the two countries that come to mind, excuse me, the two countries that come to mind with that regard are, number one, China, and I think this is also why there's also narratives about like how far ahead China is of the United States. Well, China actually makes things, and I've said this over and over. I know that you don't always take me at my word for it, but when the United States both again makes when our national product is based on passing money around, is based on financial, insurance, and real estate, and not about making cars or mining or things that require physical inputs. I get worried, and I think that countries that do rely on those physical inputs are very different. And Mexico and China are two of the countries that come to mind, top of the list. So Mexico has.
As places that make things, like you're saying, they both have robust manufacturing, and that's one of the things that you're saying we should key into.
Absolutely. And we again, like what the last two words of FIRE are real estate, and part of the way that we create or you know put hand in hand with this creation of dollars is the inflation of our assets here in the United States. And part of where regular Americans get behind is either they don't own one of those assets, or they are in areas that lag behind the inflation of the asset prices. Well, turn around and look at Mexico. Land and property are very cheap in Mexico, but this is part of them not playing that game. Now, you go down to Costa Rica and look at how the price of land and property has look at the correlation of the rise in prices of real estate there, and look at Nicaragua, look at Mexico, and they are very far behind. Nicaragua doesn't play with the United States at all. Mexico provides jobs and agriculture to, agricultural products, cars, whatever it may be. It was very interested with free trade and securing roads into the American economy, um, but they have tried to remain a country that produces things. So, uh, I also think it's going to be very interesting what the Trump administration's policy is with regards to immigration. But already we begin to see Mexico turning away migrants at their southern border. We also saw Nicaragua playing a hand in that, and And as we begin to understand too the perversity of the dollar milkshake system with all these countries around the world, you can see many countries of the world saying, well, you know, I'm a leader, I'm paid off $20 million here. I'm supposed to have these democratic elections, but there are these people that can't get along, and the United States has structured rules, so I can't deal with them. I'm just going to put them on a plane. I'm going to send the plane to Nicaragua, and all these other countries that the United States has taken advantage of are going to let these people walk north, and America's problems will become America's problems. And I think that's why we've seen the influx of immigration that we've seen.
Well, that's an interesting way to think about what the immigration problem really is. It's the chickens coming home to roost in some sense.
Absolutely. Again, we're the great money tree, and you know, I don't have a problem with, like, you know, like inflationary money supply, but everyone needs to. If everyone is not getting into the game equally, then we begin to see, again, going back to that first image, it reminds me of the Gilded Age in America. You know, there was a time whenever the rich people had to have security forces around their children. The kidnapping of baby Lindbergh, the kidnapping of Charles Betcher's child in Colorado. That wasn't because people were good or bad. People are both. But whenever there are millions of desperate people living in tents, people living on the street in all the cities of America, desperate people are going to do desperate things.
Well, and I think that does resonate with that picture. Why is there such a large entourage for Luigi Mangione? Because there's real fear that the system that's been perpetuated here is starting to crack, and that desperate people are going to start doing very desperate things.
Well, let's. I don't know if you want to add anything there. I've black-pilled this enough for the.
No, I think that's it. That's what I mean, I'm definitely seeing it, you know, and the little you know, verbal chuckle here is because I think it's hitting upon a truth. You know, it's as the middle class in America has been hollowed out, and we're starting to see people struggling to even be able to exist in the society. We're putting ourselves into a situation where people don't have anything left to lose. This is not healthy for society. This is extremely dangerous game to play.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week.